Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I pulled into the driveway just after dusk, the hum of the engine fading as I shut off the car. The house looked exactly the same, porch light glowing warmly. Jessica's car parked neatly in its usual spot. But something felt different. Not in a way I could explain, just a shift in the air, the kind of feeling that settles in the back of your mind when something isn't quite right. I grabbed my suitcase and headed inside. The moment I stepped through the door, the scent hit me, floral, rich, unfamiliar. Jessica's perfumes were always light, citrusy, subtle. This was something else, something expensive. Jess, I called, setting my bag down by the stairs. Footsteps padded toward me, and then she was there, smiling as if everything was perfectly normal. She looked refreshed. Her hair was styled. Her makeup was done, even though she was in casual loungewear. She usually didn't put that much effort in just to stay home. "You're back early," she said, wrapping her arms around my neck. "Yeah," I murmured, hugging her back, trying to ignore the way the air around her carried that unfamiliar scent. Flight landed ahead of schedule. She pulled back, brushing her hair behind her ear, a nervous habit. "I would have picked you up." I studied her for a moment. "I didn't want to bother you." "Never a bother," she said quickly, but there was something behind her eyes. Something unreadable. I glanced around. The house was spotless. Too spotless. Jessica wasn't messy, but she was always in the middle of something. Fabric samples from event planning jobs, notes scattered on the counter. Tonight, there was nothing. Just a perfect, untouched space. I turned toward the kitchen. "You eat already?" She hesitated. "Oh yeah, just something small earlier." Lie. Jessica always waited for me when I was coming home from a trip, even if it meant eating late. We had this unspoken rule. First meal back, always together. But she had eaten without me. I nodded, pretending not to notice. As I walked past the counter, my eyes caught something. A half-empty bottle of wine. A very expensive bottle of wine. I picked it up, turning the label toward me. Didn't know we were splurging on $100 wine these days. Jessica let out a soft laugh, moving past me toward the sink. "Oh, that? It was a gift. A client sent it over after I locked in a big deal." I raised an eyebrow. "A client sent you an expensive bottle of wine as a thank you." She nodded, too quickly. "Yeah, some of them are just generous like that." Lie. I knew Jessica's clients. Corporations, business owners, brands. They didn't send wine. They sent wire transfers. I set the bottle down carefully. "You must be killing it at work." She grinned. "Best month yet." Another lie. Jessica had complained just last month about business slowing down. The industry was changing, and she was having a harder time landing high-end contracts. But now, suddenly, she was getting gifts from clients? I let out a slow breath, pushing the thought away for now. "Come on," she said, tugging my hand. "Tell me about the trip. How was Seattle?" I let her lead me to the couch, let her curl up next to me, let her talk like everything was fine. But my mind was already working through the details. The unfamiliar perfume, the spotless house, the expensive wine. Jessica was lying to me. I said no why. Yet, the next morning, Jessica moved around the house as if nothing was wrong. She hummed to herself while making coffee, scrolling through her phone, looking completely at ease. She kissed me on the cheek when I walked into the kitchen, her smile effortless. If I hadn't already noticed the small inconsistencies, I wouldn't have thought twice about her behavior. "Morning," she said, pouring herself a cup. "Morning," I replied, watching her carefully. She moved to the counter, tapping away at her phone, barely looking at me. I leaned against the island, pretending to check my emails. The expensive bottle of wine from last night was still sitting on the counter, half empty. I glanced at it again, my mind replaying her words. "A client sent it over. Big day ahead?" I asked casually. She nodded, sipping her coffee. "Yeah, I have some meetings lined up, and I need to finalize the details for the winery gala next month." My fingers tightened around my mug. "The winery gala?" She looked up, smiling. "Yeah, it's a huge opportunity. If I pull this off, I'll get more high-end contracts. It could change everything." Her eyes lit up as she spoke, excitement laced in her voice. But there was something else beneath it, something controlled. like she was curating her words. I played along. That's great. You've been working hard for something like this. She nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. That's why I've been spending so much time at the vineyard. It's all about building relationships with the right people. There it was. She had been at the vineyard. I forced a smirk. Guess that explains the wine. Jessica let out a soft laugh. Yeah, the owner is generous. He wanted me to try a few selections, see what works best for the event. My stomach twisted. The owner. I had met him once. Daniel Laurent. Mid-40s. Charismatic. Wealthy. The type of man who didn't need to impress anyone, because people were already impressed by him. I had barely spoken to him at the last event Jessica planned, but even then, I had noticed how comfortable she was around him. I set my mug down. Must be nice working with someone that's successful. She shrugged. It is. He's got a great vision for his brand, and he trusts me to execute it. Trust. That word sat heavy in my chest. I didn't push further. Not yet. Instead, I waited until she went upstairs to shower, then walked into her office. Jessica's workspace was always organized. A large desk with neatly stacked folders, her laptop, and a planner she never went anywhere without. I flipped open the planner, skimming through her recent notes. Most of it was work-related, guest lists, seating charts, budget breakdowns. But then, toward the back, I saw something odd. A name. CL. No last name. No details. Just initials. Next to it, a note. Private tasting. Reschedule. I frowned. Jessica didn't handle wine tastings. She planned events. Why was she scheduling a private one? The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me shut the planner and step back. Jessica walked in, towel drying her hair, her expression relaxed. "What are you up to?" she asked. I smiled. "Just checking my schedule for the week." She nodded, dropping onto the couch. "You should come to the gala next month." I tilted my head. "Oh yeah. Yeah. It'll be fun," she said, stretching. "Besides, you always say I don't bring you to enough of my events." She was trying too hard. I walked over, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Sounds like a plan." She smiled, satisfied. But I wasn't. CL private tasting. The expensive wine. Jessica was hiding something. And I was going to find out what. Jessica left for her meetings just after 9, kissing me quickly before heading out the door. I watched from the window as she backed out of the driveway, her phone already in her hand before she even hit the street. The moment she was gone, I moved. I started with her office again, flipping open her planner to the same note. CL, private tasting, reschedule. Micah told me it had nothing to do with business. I grabbed my phone and typed CL Winery Napa Valley into the search bar. One result stood out. Charles Laurent, Daniel Laurent's younger brother. I clenched my jaw. I had only met Daniel in passing, but I knew nothing about Charles. Jessica had never mentioned him, not even once. I kept searching. Charles wasn't just involved in the winery. He was the silent partner, the man behind the scenes. No social media, no public interviews, no personal details. But I found one thing that mattered. He was in charge of private tastings. A slow burn of anger settled in my chest. I closed the planner and turned to her laptop. Jessica never logged out of her email. I clicked on her inbox, scanning for anything unusual. Then I saw it. An email chain buried under work-related messages. Subject, upcoming visit Charles Laurent. Looking forward to seeing you again. Let me know when you can slip away. Jessica, soon. Just need to rearrange a few things. I'll text you. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady. This wasn't about work. I closed the laptop carefully, forcing myself to breathe. Bursting into anger now wouldn't help. I needed more. Proof. Something undeniable. Then I spotted something in the corner of the room. A small, navy blue box, wrapped neatly with silver ribbon. I picked it up, turning it in my hands. No tag. No name. But I already knew it wasn't for me. I peeled back the wrapping, my stomach twisting. Inside was a gold cufflink set. Expensive. Elegant. Not my style. I exhaled slowly, setting the box down. Jessica had lied to my face. She wasn't just securing business deals. She was meeting him, buying him gifts, rescheduling him into her life. But she had no idea that I had just rewritten the rules of the game. I put the cufflinks back in the box, carefully rewrapping them. Then I walked into the garage, grabbed a tiny screwdriver from my toolbox, and returned to the desk. With careful precision, I unscrewed the backs of both cufflinks. And then I superglued them shut. Whoever put them on next wouldn't be able to take them off without destroying them. A small, petty move, but it was only the beginning. I put everything back exactly how I found it, then walked out of the office, grabbing my keys. It was time to pay a visit to Laurent Winery. I needed to see Charles Laurent for myself. And if Jessica thought she was the only one who could play this game, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. Laurent Winery was even more impressive in person than in the promotional photos. Rows of perfectly aligned grapevines stretched toward the horizon, the main building a sleek combination of modern design and old-world charm. It was the kind of place that catered to an elite clientele, people who spent small fortunes on wine tastings and private events. I parked near the entrance, taking a slow breath. I didn't know exactly what I was walking into, but I had no intention of leaving without answers. Jessica had been here, more than once, and it wasn't for business. Inside, the tasting room was all polished wood and soft lighting, the air thick with the scent of aged oak and expensive wines. A young woman behind the counter greeted me with a bright smile. "Welcome to Laurent Winery. Are you here for tasting or a tour?" I returned the smile, keeping my tone casual. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with Charles Laurent. Is he around?" Her expression flickered with something, surprise, maybe even curiosity, but she covered it quickly. "Mr. Laurent usually meets with clients by appointment only." I leaned against the counter slightly, lowering my voice just enough to make it sound like I was in on something. "I think he'll want to see me. Tell him it's about a mutual acquaintance." She hesitated, glancing toward a side hallway before nodding. "Wait here." I watched as she disappeared through a glass door. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and a man stepped out. Charles Laurent. He was taller than I expected, lean but confident in the way men with too much money tend to be. Dark hair, sharp features, dressed in a fitted blazer despite the California heat. He had the look of someone who knew he was untouchable. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth, practiced. I extended a hand, playing the role I needed to play. "Mark Evans, financial analyst. My wife, Jessica, is an event planner. I believe she's been working with your brother, Daniel." I saw it, the faintest hesitation, a flicker of recognition at Jessica's name before he covered it up. Yes, of course. Jessica has done some work with us." I tilted my head. "I hear she's been visiting quite a bit. Private tastings and all." His smile didn't falter, but I noticed the way he shifted his weight slightly, just enough to make me know he wasn't expecting this conversation. "We offer private tastings to many of our event partners. It's part of the experience, right?" I said, nodding slowly. "And I'm sure you're very selective about who gets those private sessions." His eyes narrowed just slightly. "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Evans?" I let the silence stretch, watching him. He was too calm, too controlled. But there was something else, something behind his eyes. He knew who I was. Jessica had talked about me. I exhaled, forcing an easy chuckle. Just wanted to put a face to the name. Jessica's been talking about Laurent Winery a lot lately. I figured I'd see what all the excitement was about. Charles nodded, but I could tell he was waiting for me to say something else, to push further. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I extended my hand again. "Thanks for your time." He hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already suspected before shaking my hand. His grip was firm, controlled. As I walked back to my car, I glanced back once. Charles was still standing there, watching me. I didn't need any more proof. Jessica was hiding something, and Charles Laurent was at the center of it. But now he knew that I knew, and that changed everything. Jessica had no idea I had just shaken hands with Charles Laurent. No idea I'd stood there, watching his carefully measured expression, seeing the exact moment he realized who I was. She was still playing her game, still pretending everything was normal, but the rules had changed. Now, I wasn't just watching, I was hunting. That evening, when Jessica came home, she acted exactly the same as she always did. She kicked off her heels, poured herself a glass of wine, another high-end bottle, of course, and sat down across from me like nothing was wrong. "Long day?" I asked, my voice even. She sighed dramatically. "You have no idea. The gala planning is getting insane. The client keeps making last-minute changes, and I swear, they think I can perform miracles. I smirked. You usually do. She smiled at that, swirling her wine in the glass. True, but it's exhausting. I leaned forward slightly. Still meeting with Daniel Laurent? Her fingers tightened just a fraction around the stem of her glass. Yeah, he's pretty involved in the planning. Lie. I had just been at the winery, and Daniel Laurent wasn't anywhere near this. It was Charles she was meeting with. Must be a big deal, I said casually. All these late nights, private tastings, big gifts. Jessica let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. You and that bottle of wine. I told you it was just a thank you gift. I tilted my head. From Daniel? A hesitation. Small but there. Yeah, lie. I took a slow sip of my own drink, letting the silence stretch. I was thinking I should come with you next time. She blinked. What? To the winery. Meet the Laurents, see what you're working on. You always say I don't take enough interest in your projects. Jessica forced a smile. Oh, babe, you'd be so bored. It's just meetings and planning logistics. Nothing exciting. I shrugged. Still, I like to see it. You've been spending so much time there, I feel like I should know more about it. She laughed again, but this time it was thinner. You don't need to babysit me at work. I wouldn't be babysitting, I said smoothly. Just supporting. Jessica set her wine glass down, standing up. You're acting weird. I smirked. Am I? She studied me for a moment, searching my face, looking for a sign that I knew. But I'd spent years reading people, analyzing numbers, watching for patterns. I wasn't going to break my act now. Finally, she let out a breath. Look, I just don't think it's necessary. I'm handling everything fine on my own. I nodded slowly. If you say so. She picked up her glass and walked to the kitchen, ending the conversation. But I'd already gotten what I needed. She didn't want me there. Not because it was boring, because it was a risk. That night, after she fell asleep, I grabbed my laptop and logged into our shared credit card account. I scrolled through the recent transactions, looking for anything that stood out. And then I found it. A charge from Laurent Winery. Not for event planning. For private villa stay. I stared at the screen, my pulse slow and steady. Jessica had booked a stay at the vineyard. Not a work-related event. Not a corporate retreat. Something private. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling through my nose. She had been so careful. So good at covering her tracks. But even the best liars slip up. And this was the mistake that was going to cost her everything. Jessica thought she was untouchable. She had spent months perfecting her lies, weaving excuses so seamlessly that she probably believed them herself. But she had made a mistake, a big one. That private villa stay at Laurent Winery wasn't just some oversight. It was proof. Undeniable, inescapable proof. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the transaction on my screen. I could already see how she'd try to explain it away if I confronted her. Oh, it was part of the gala planning. A perk for event partners. Another lie. Another smooth excuse. But I wasn't going to give her the chance. I needed to catch her. I closed my laptop, exhaled slowly, and picked up my phone. It was late, but I didn't care. I scrolled through my contact until I found a number I was looking for, a friend in private security. Someone who owed me a favor. I hit call. Mark? A groggy voice answered. Hey, sorry to call this late, I said smoothly. I need some surveillance footage pulled. Can you help me out? A pause. Then a sigh. Depends on where and how illegal it is. I smirked. Nothing illegal. Just business. The next morning, I had an email sitting in my inbox. Security footage from Laurent Winery's private villa entrance. I clicked the file, my pulse steady. The first few clips were nothing. Employees coming and going, delivery trucks. Then the timestamp changed. Last Thursday, 3:17 p.m. A car pulled up. Jessica. I clenched my jaw as I watched her step out, smoothing down her dress, adjusting her bag over her shoulder. She wasn't dressed for work. She checked her phone, then walked toward the villa entrance. A moment later, the door opened. Charles Laurent. The way he looked at her told me everything I needed to know. Jessica stepped inside, and the door shut behind them. No hesitation. No uncertainty. She had done this before. I sat back, my fingers pressing against the edge of the desk. There it was. Not just suspicion, not just gut instinct. Cold, undeniable proof. and she had no idea that I had it. That night, when Jessica came home, she acted the same as always. Kicked off her shoes, grabbed a glass of wine, smiled at me like nothing had changed. I studied her carefully. She had no idea her world was about to collapse. "Long day?" I asked. She sighed, stretching. "Exhausting. I had to smooth over a client issue all afternoon. You know how it is." I smirked. "Yeah, must have been stressful." She nodded, taking a sip of wine. "You have no idea." Lie. I knew exactly where she had been last Thursday afternoon. And soon, she was going to know exactly what it felt like to lose everything. Jessica had no idea. She sat across from me, sipping her wine, scrolling through her phone, relaxed in the way only someone who believed they were in complete control could be. She had spent months crafting this lie, weaving it so effortlessly that she probably thought it would never unravel. But I had the footage, the proof, and now it was just a matter of how I wanted to destroy her. I could have confronted her right then, thrown my phone onto the table, played the video of her stepping into that private villa with Charles Laurent. Watch her scramble for an excuse. Watch the perfect mask she wore crack and shatter. But that wasn't enough. Jessica had been careful. Too careful. She wouldn't break down with just accusations. She would try to talk her way out of it. Twist it into something else. Make me doubt what I already knew was true. No, I wanted something better. Something final. I sat back in my chair, swirling the last of my drink. "So, what's on the schedule tomorrow?" She looked up, smiling. "Meetings in the morning, then another site visit at the winery." I kept my expression neutral. "More prep for the gala?" She nodded, her voice light. "Yeah, just some final walkthroughs." Lie. Jessica wasn't going there for work. She was going to him. And this time, I was going to be there too. The next afternoon, I left work early, driving straight to Laurent Winery. I parked at a distance, far enough that no one would recognize my car, and waited. At exactly 2:45 p.m., Jessica's car pulled in. She didn't hesitate. She wasn't checking her phone for directions, wasn't acting like someone arriving for a business meeting. She knew exactly where she was going. I watched as she stepped out, adjusting her blouse, brushing her hair behind her ear. Then she walked up the private pathway, not toward the main event hall, but to the villa. My hands tightened around the wheel. She knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Charles Laurent stood there, dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking at her with the kind of ease that made my stomach twist. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was something practiced. Jessica smiled. And then she stepped inside. The door shut behind her. I sat there for a moment, exhaling slowly through my nose, letting the reality of it settle deep into my chest. I'd been right all along. But now, it was her turn to know what it felt like to be played. I pulled out my phone and clicked on my messages. I had been working on something for days, waiting for the right moment. And now, the moment had come. I hit send. A notification popped up, "File transfer successful." A few minutes later, my phone vibrated. Message received. From Daniel Laurent, the real owner of Laurent Winery. Jessica had spent all this time sneaking around with Charles, thinking she was getting away with it. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. Charles wasn't the one who owned this place. Daniel did. And now, he knew exactly what had been happening behind his back. By the time Jessica walked out of that villa, her world would already be falling apart. She just didn't know it yet. Jessica walked out of the villa an hour later, completely unaware that her life was already falling apart. She had no idea that while she had been inside, smiling at Charles, adjusting her blouse, playing pretend, I had pulled the final string. I watched from a distance as she walked to her car, checked her phone, and smoothed her hair like nothing had happened, like she had spent the afternoon doing actual work. But Jessica wasn't in control anymore. I had sent the video, not just to Daniel Laurent, but to the winery's biggest investors, men and women who had poured millions into Laurent Winery, expecting prestige, professionalism, a brand built on excellence. And now, instead of that, they were watching the owner's brother using the winery as his personal hookup spot. And the woman in the video, the event planner they had just hired to run their biggest gala. By the time Jessica got into her car and drove off, the storm had already started brewing. I gave it a few minutes before leaving. There was no rush now. No frantic need to catch her. I had everything I needed. When I got home, I poured myself a drink and waited. And then, at exactly 7:13 p.m., my phone rang. Jessica. I smirked, staring at the screen before answering. Hey, babe. Her voice was shaking. Mark, we have a huge problem. I took a slow sip of my drink. Yeah. I don't know what happened, but Daniel just called. The investors, she sucked in a breath. Someone sent them a video. I stretched my legs out, completely relaxed. A video? Yes. Of me. Of me at the villa with Charles. Mark, someone recorded me. I let the silence drag out, just a little too long. Then I exhaled. Wow, that's rough. Jessica's voice wavered. Mark, you don't sound surprised. I tilted my head slightly. That's because I'm not. Silence. Then, very quietly, you did this. I smiled. I just thought Daniel and his investors deserved to know how his family was handling business deals. Her breath hitched. Mark, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. My voice sharpened. You've been sneaking off for months. Lying. Using your job as an excuse while you met up with him. Thinking you'd never get caught. Her breathing was rapid now, panicked. I was going to end it, okay? It wasn't serious, stop. My voice was cold. You don't get to lie anymore. A choked sob. Then what did you do? I let my smirk grow. Oh, Jessica, you haven't even seen the best part yet. Tomorrow night was the winery gala, the biggest event of the season. The one she had been planning, the one that would have put her on the map as a top-tier event coordinator. And it was the night I had chosen to expose her. Publicly, in front of every single guest. Jessica wanted a perfect, glamorous career in the event industry. Tomorrow, she was about to have a night she'd never forget. For all the wrong reasons. Jessica called me 6 more times. I didn't answer. She sent frantic texts. Jessica, Mark, please. We need to talk. This isn't what you think. Jessica, Daniel is furious. The investors are pulling back. They think I've ruined the event. Jessica, please just come home so we can fix this. I laughed to myself. Fix this? There was nothing to fix. She wasn't panicked because she had hurt me. She wasn't panicked because she had destroyed our marriage. She was panicked because she was losing everything. I let her texts go unanswered. Let her stew in a mess she had created. Then, just before midnight, I sent her one single text back. Me, I'll see you at the gala. Nothing else. No explanation. No reassurance. Let her wonder. Let her fear what was coming next. The next day, I arrived at the winery an hour before the gala started. The staff was bustling, finalizing details, setting up tables, adjusting lights. Jessica was there, too. I saw her across the room, talking to Daniel Laurent, her expression tight with forced professionalism. She was barely holding it together. Good. She didn't notice me at first. But Charles did. He was standing near the entrance, dressed in a tailored suit, sipping a glass of wine like nothing had happened. But when his eyes landed on me, I saw the flicker of recognition, of realization. He knew. I was the one who had done this. I smirked, tipping my glass toward him in a silent toast. His jaw tightened. He looked away first. Jessica finally saw me about 10 minutes later. She excused herself from Daniel, then walked toward me quickly, her heels clicking against the floor. She was good. Her face was calm, her smile just the right level of professional. To everyone else, she looked in control. But I could see it. The panic in her eyes. The slight tremor in her hands. Mark, she said, her voice low, careful. You came. I took a sip of my drink, completely relaxed. Of course. Wouldn't miss it. She swallowed. Can we talk? I smiled. We are talking. Her fingers curled slightly. Not here. I leaned in just enough to make her nervous. I think here is perfect. She inhaled sharply. Mark, please. The sound on microphone being tapped cut her off. Jessica turned toward the stage as Daniel Laurent stepped forward, clearing his throat. The room quieted as guests turned their attention to him. The moment had arrived. I took a slow breath, setting my glass down. And then, before Jessica could react, I took 3 steps forward and grabbed the microphone. The room stilled. Jessica's face went pale. I smiled, and then I said, loud and clear for everyone to hear, tonight, we toast to 2 things. fine wine, and the world-class affair between my wife and the owner's brother. Cheers, everyone. A stunned silence crashed over the room. Jessica's mouth fell open in shock. Charles turned rigid, his fingers tightening around his glass. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Investors turned to Daniel Laurent, whispering, realizing exactly what had happened. And then, chaos. Jessica reached for me, but I stepped back. Daniel Laurent's face darkened as he turned toward his brother, his expression full of betrayal. Sponsors, business partners, people with real power pulled out their phones, muttering about cutting funding. Jessica's career? Over. Charles's position at the winery? Destroyed. I turned, slipping my hands into my pockets as I watched it all unfold. Jessica had played her game, but in the end, I had won. The room had collapsed into chaos. The moment my words left the microphone, they shattered the carefully curated image Jessica had built. Murmurs turned into full conversations, whispers turned into gasps, and investors exchanged sharp glances, already making silent decisions about pulling their funding. Jessica stood frozen, her face pale, her lips parted as if she wanted to say something. Anything, but couldn't find the words. Charles Laurent, the man she had risked everything for, was just as stiff, his jaw locked, fingers clenched around the stem of his wine glass like he wanted to crush it. But Daniel Laurent? He looked furious. I watched as his face turned stone cold, his sharp eyes flicking from me to his brother. He wasn't a fool. He had already put the pieces together. And he wasn't just angry about the affair. He was humiliated. Because I hadn't just revealed the truth. I had done it in front of the people who mattered most to him. The investors, the sponsors, the media representatives covering the event. And worst of all, his wife. She had been standing near the back, perfectly put together in her designer dress, holding a champagne flute with the grace of someone who had spent years mastering high society events. But now, she looked like she had been sucker punched. Her fingers trembled around the glass. She stared at Charles, her lips pressing together, and then, without a word, she turned and walked out. Jessica finally snapped out of it. "Mark," she breathed, stepping toward me, reaching for my arm like she could somehow pull me out of this moment and rewrite history. I stepped back, hands in my pockets, completely unbothered. "What's wrong, Jess?" I asked, my voice dripping with false concern. "I thought we were celebrating." Her eyes darted around the room, realizing everyone was staring, watching, judging. The powerful men and women she had been trying to impress for years were now seeing her for exactly what she was. Jessica turned to Daniel, desperate. But Daniel wasn't listening. He was already moving toward Charles. "You arrogant little piece of—" Daniel's voice was low and deadly, just before he grabbed his brother's jacket and yanked him forward. The crowd gasped, stepping back as the tension between them snapped. Charles barely got out a single word before Daniel punched him. It wasn't a wild swing. It was calculated, precise, the kind of hit that was meant to send a message. Charles stumbled back, knocking into a nearby table, sending a tray of hors d'oeuvres crashing to the floor. He wiped at his lip, glaring at his brother, but he didn't fight back. He knew better. Jessica spun around, her voice breaking. "Stop it. This isn't what?" I cut in. "Isn't what it looks like." She turned to me, her breathing unsteady. "Mark, please. We need to talk. In private." I let out a sharp laugh. "Private? You didn't care about privacy when you were sneaking off to his villa, did you?" Jessica flinched, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." "Yeah." I tilted my head. "How exactly did you mean for it to happen?" She swallowed, looking at me like she was desperately trying to find the right words. But there weren't any, because there was no explanation that could fix this. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, scrolling casually as if I wasn't standing in the middle of her career funeral. "By the way," I said, "while we're being honest here, I should probably let you know, I already emptied our joint bank account." Jessica's breath hitched. "What?" I didn't look up. "Yeah, moved everything into my personal account last week." I tapped the screen. "Oh, and the house. It's in my name. You should probably start looking for a new place." Her entire body went stiff. You can't do that." I finally looked at her. I already did. Jessica's face crumbled. Mark, please. Her voice cracked. Not with anger. With panic. Because this wasn't just about me leaving. This was about her losing everything. She reached for me again, but I took another step back. We're done, Jess. Her eyes filled with tears. I made a mistake. I nodded. Yeah, you did. She exhaled shakily, glancing around, realizing she had no way out of this. Daniel had already stormed off, his security team escorting a furious Charles out of the event. The investors were whispering to each other, making calls, their expressions unreadable. But I already knew. They were pulling out. Loron Winery was about to lose millions in funding. Jessica was about to lose her entire career. And me? I had nothing left to lose. I turned toward the exit, walking away without another word. Jessica's voice followed me, soft, broken. Mark, I didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't say another damn thing. I walked out of that event, out of that life, out of everything she had taken for granted. And I never looked back. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.